Thank you, Tracy. You set the bar incredibly high, and I'm short, so I hope I learn to jump. Wow. Well, it's more my honor than anything to be here with you all today, and so I want to thank Tracy and Annette Holba and Cannon Sawyer for the opportunity to be here to talk with you and to share my thoughts on the basic course with you. It's a privilege to do it. Tracy mentioned that I don't like public speaking, and I often tell my students this. It's not that I don't like it. I actually have an intense fear of it, which I've learned to manage over time. And one of the things I started to realize, and whenever I teach fear of public speaking, I ask my students, I run through the list, and I say, number one fear everybody has is death. Or I'm sorry, number one fear everybody has is public speaking. Number two is death. I said, what about people who fear that they're going to die while public speaking? I'm in that category, so I guess I'm kind of on my own list. Well, initially when Tracy asked me to talk with you today, I wanted to talk about interteaching, which is a unique way to incorporate speaking exercises into the basic course. But as I thought more about the chance to share my perspective with you and the unique opportunity afforded by this conference, I broadened the scope a bit. So I'll still have a chance to explain interteaching at a session later this afternoon. But for now, I guess I kind of want to go big before I go home. So today what I want to do is I want to share with you what I found on my personal version of what Holocaust survivor Viktor Frankl called man's search for meaning. I want to beg, beseech, ask, and hopefully inspire you to join me on what I see as our mission to strengthen the basic course. As philanthropist W. Clement Stone said, when you discover your mission, you feel its demand. It will fill you with enthusiasm and a burning desire to get to work on it. I want you all to hopefully feel that by the end of my talk today. No small task, so I'm going to try. To understand this mission, our vocation, the way that I do, I think it's necessary to explain what inspired me to undertake this particular daunting task. I'll try to do this briefly. I never saw myself as a college professor. I never sought to do it. I never signed any form saying that's what I want to be. Heck, I never took a communication course until my first year in the master's program at the University of Maine. Even weirder still, I only went to Maine for my master's degree because the baseball coach there asked me to come and work as the team's volunteer assistant. Being a TA in communication just happened to pay the bills. You see, all I wanted to do was coach, not teach. Little did I know that over time I realized they're quite similar. My journey took an unexpected turn on September 11th, 2001. I was in my second year at Maine when the towers fell. This date affected all of us, and I was no different. I come from a family of 5 brothers, and at that moment, one of them worked several blocks from the Trade Center, and the other was a New York City police officer. Both survived, but my brother, the police officer, still won't talk about what happened that day. You see, he was called back to the city while on his way home from a night shift, and we didn't hear from him until later that evening. In fact, the last thing he did before turning around on the George Washington Bridge was call my other brother and tell him, get the hell out of New York City. That brother then spent 24 hours walking out of New York. I looked at what my brother did, what he went through, and I realized he spent his career, not just that day, serving people, trying to make their lives better. And I realized that was what I needed to do. I needed to dedicate my talents to improving society and helping others. It was then, to borrow a phrase from former President George W. Bush, that our mission and soon after our moment became clear to me. Following 9/11, I took an inventory of my skills and realized I was built like a marshmallow. So being a police officer or joining the military just wasn't going to happen. I thought about teaching and realized that was where I do the most good, affecting far more people than I did as a coach. After a few weeks, I decided that I wanted to pursue a doctorate and dedicate myself to the basic course, where as a director, I had the chance to impact thousands of lives every year. It is that mission, that purpose that drives me. I want to go to bed at night knowing that if it was my last day on earth, that I spent my time as a college professor positively influencing as many students as possible that day. Sometimes through encouragement, other times, as we all know, with a little tough love. I also have grown to realize that to fulfill this mission, to be the best instructor, professor, mentor, colleague, teacher, and basic course director that I can be, requires that I engage in continuous self-reflection about what we do. Over the last several years, this reflection has illustrated several things about what we do that I've forced myself to rethink, beginning with how I approach my job. In fact, in scanning the landscape of higher education over the last decade, I see this moment. Our moment for this mission is now. The basic course has been threatened at numerous institutions in recent years. Recently, we just heard this morning from Scranton, with schools using the credit hour crunch to move communication instruction into majors and away from our discipline. This has had disastrous consequences, and often we realize things are bad too late to respond. As my friend Sam Wallace likes to say, we start screaming that the bad guys are coming down the hall when they're actually occupying our office. It's this backdrop, this context, that has created the moment for our mission to strengthen our basic course. After all, the basic course is, as Frank Dance calls it, the bread and butter of our discipline, or if you prefer, Steve Beebe's front porch metaphor. What I want to share with you then is a philosophical approach to this mission. One that requires, as all good things do, hard work, commitment, and persistence. My hope is that by the end of my talk today, you'll be willing to pick up this standard and help move our course and our discipline forward. At the University of Dayton, our motto is learn, lead, and serve. A very Catholic phrase, if there ever was one. We're a Marianist institution, so. That said, as I thought about our talk today, it struck me that those words need not be religious, nor need they be only applicable to undergraduates. They can apply to the way we should treat our roles in the basic course. And so they are the principles that form how we can strengthen the basic course. We are leaders, learners, and we serve numerous constituencies. So for the bulk of my talk today, I want to explain what I mean by learning, leading, and serving in the basic course, and how, when done right, it will lead to what I call a living basic course. I want to be clear, though, what I'm not going to do today. I'm not going to tell you how to teach your course, what to teach in your course, how many assignments to have, how many speeches you should do, how long they should be. Rather, I'm talking about an approach to determining those things, a way to treat your course, not teach your course. The first element of the motto, learn. Sounds simple enough, right? Learning, though, is not something our students alone do. It's a requirement for all of us. And as I intend to hopefully illustrate, it's more important for us than even for them. First, and perhaps most important, it is our responsibility to learn about what we teach. Many people suffer from the misconception that the basic course doesn't change, that there have been no new advancements in our understanding of communication as it's taught in that course. Nothing could be further from the truth. In a recent essay in the centennial issue of Communication Education, Sherry Moriali, Sam Wallace, and I trace the history of the basic course and illustrate pretty clearly that it has changed significantly since we began teaching it outside of English in the early 20th century. We've moved from a strictly delivery-focused public speaking course to one that incorporates social scientific audience analysis methods. We've changed the course from public speaking to one that includes interpersonal and small group communication. Over the last 20 years or so, we started to include elements of civic engagement, social justice, computer-mediated communication. The course has changed, so we should never say we do things in the course the way that we do because that's how we've always done them. There is nothing in the course we've always done. Staying abreast on the content of the course and new ways to do things in it is essential for keeping the course relevant and important for our students. Second, it's essential for us to learn about how to administer the course. This area is particularly difficult for many people because there are no doctoral programs in communication administration or basic course direction. There's no doctoral program in communication education. We do not, as a discipline, offer experts for campus consultations to help people get a different perspective on how they create and run the course. We're often left thinking we're it. We're on our own. We're on an island. But we're not. As bad as those things are, there is hope. There are opportunities to learn about course management if we only seek them out. This conference is just one of those places you can go to gather information on administrating the basic course. Last summer, the University of Dayton and NCA sponsored a Basic Course Director Training Institute that provided an intense and enjoyable 3-day seminar on all the things that go into basic course direction, from scheduling and training to budgeting and assessment. That's the first time NCA sponsored something like that. In the fall, Sherry Simons, from my mind, the best basic course director in the business, traveled to the 4 corners of the U.S. and held similar workshops for basic course instructors and directors. For the last 52 years, the Basic Course Directors Conference has been held for the express purpose of sharing ideas and training course directors. Our regional conferences and the annual NCA gathering all have basic course divisions or interest groups that provide panels and up-to-date research on the basic course and its management. There are opportunities to learn from each other out there, despite the lack of a formal doctorate in BCDing. We must take advantage of them so our course remains at the center of our students' education where it belongs. One thing I know from my time doing this job is that you never know what you don't know. So keep learning about course direction and administration. Learning can be challenging, to be sure. It takes time and effort, things we have in short supply, but that's no different from what we ask of our students. One area where we need to improve our abilities as a whole is in assessment. Several of you said it's one of the reasons why you're here today. I know the running joke on campuses is that administrations put the ass in assessment. Hell, I used to make those cracks myself. There's also the continual perception that assessment is the collection of what one person at a conference once said was to collect mountains of data with no purpose other than to create extra work. Again, until about 5 years ago, I shared that perception. Then I learned what assessment actually is and what it can do for my students and my courses when I attended an assessment institute at IUPUI. Assessment does not need to be overly burdensome, and I would argue if it is, it's not being done right. Learning that assessment of student learning outcomes, you know those pesky little things we say we want our students to do when they leave our course, helps us understand how we can improve our courses and thus better facilitate our students' learning. As I'll illustrate a bit later, assessment, when done right, can be one of the most rewarding parts of being a college professor and program director. So in addition to the institutes and conferences, where else can we go to learn about the basic course? Journals. Our discipline has a tremendous number of opportunities in journals to both read and publish analyses of and models for basic course innovation. Communication Teacher publishes both assessment data as well as great ideas for teaching speech. The best of the best, actually. Looking for an idea for a different assignment? Go there first. Communication Education publishes the cream of the crop of pedagogical pieces in our field. If you haven't seen it, consider taking a look at it. The Basic Communication Course Annual is the only journal in the field, in any field that I know of, dedicated to scholarship on one class, our class. Make sure you have access to it through your libraries. If you don't, tell them to subscribe. Finally, I'd also highlight the Journal of Communication Administration, which recently relaunched and has published some very good essays on administrative challenges faced within our discipline. If we want to be the best at what we do, we should read what the best are doing. And that starts in these journals. If you're doing something innovative, don't hoard it like a Mike Schmidt rookie card. Share it with the rest of us through these journals. Write it up. Because a rising tide of basic course scholarship raises all basic course boats. I haven't forgotten the importance of learning for students. After all, it's what we're all about. I think all of us can agree the best thing in the world that gives you that really warm and fuzzy feeling is seeing a student improve on presentations as the semester rolls on. That said, we need to stop and consider what it is our students are learning in our course and what we're actually trying to teach them. A story. In spring 2006, as I was finishing my fourth and final doctoral year at Georgia State, several friends and I went out to dinner. As we sat down, the hostess came up and asked if I remembered her. I said the face was familiar, but the name escaped me. This happens a lot. She said she had me for public speaking a few years earlier and never forgot the first day of class. In fact, she pulled out a folded but clearly yellowing piece of paper that was the copy of a speech I used to read to my classes on day one, The Purpose of Education by Martin Luther King Jr. She said she never forgot that speech and thought it was so inspirational she kept it in her purse ever since as a reminder of why she was in college. I was moved. I'm sure anybody would be. 4 years later, yellowed speech. Then I began to wonder, what else had she learned from the class? What else could she recall? So, I asked. She said, a little embarrassed, just the speech. I still felt good. A few years later, I reflected on the experience and began to realize that the speech was not what the class was about. I had specific course outcomes I wanted students to do, and that was what I wanted them to learn, what I wanted them to remember, not a speech they could always Google whenever they wanted it. I became focused like a laser from that point forward on designing student learning objectives, and everything I do in the course is governed by them now. These articulate what I want students to learn. Everything else is not really relevant to the task at hand. It's about the learning outcome. It is about what the learning outcomes are, not what I want to do in the class. It's not about me. Learning is core to what we do. It's essential. It's the lifeblood of our purpose. We must be continually learning about the field of communication, reading journals and attending conferences. We must strive to develop our management skills by learning as much as we can about how to be an effective administrator. We must also learn how to assess our students' learning by measuring achievement of our student learning objectives. The first step toward creating a living course that makes our craft rewarding beyond measure is committing ourselves to being not just custodians of our students' learning, but lifelong learners ourselves. That is how, as slam poet Taylor Mali eloquently puts it, we help our students and ourselves not just question authority, but speak with it. Being knowledgeable, though, is not the only central element of strengthening the basic course. We need leaders. Organizational communication scholars have a lot to say about leadership. For starters, not all managers are leaders, and not all leaders are managers. Think about that, because it says a lot about the way that we structure the basic course. Many departments do not have basic course directors or coordinators, and many that do often either rotate the position amongst faculty or give it to an untenured, read unprotected faculty member. This treats the role as a manager of the course, someone who handles schedules, TA training, tackles curriculum and textbook selection procedures, deals with the plagiarists, does all the stuff that faculty don't want to do. There's nothing bad about this, nor is there anything that prohibits these individuals in these roles from being leaders in addition to managers. The key here is that others may see the position as a manager, there to make the proverbial trains run on time, but the person in the role, you can see yourselves as more. You can lead. Leadership requires several things, though. First, leadership requires vision. To lead people or a course forward requires that you know where you want to take it. You need to know the goals you have in mind and have a general idea for how you will achieve those goals. When I was first hired at the University of Dayton, they handed me 4 student learning outcomes and said, build a course from this. You see, a few years earlier, their course had been removed from general education, and they had to fight very hard to get it back in by revisioning it, by engaging the campus and seeing what it should be about. I immediately started forming an idea of what I wanted the course to look like and how I wanted to get there. I wrote a 5-year plan which set goals each year for the course and the program to achieve. The goals were not just curricular, they were extracurricular, with goals for outside involvement and investment in what we were doing. The 5-year plan is my vision for my course, and the things I do all try to make that vision a reality, kind of like a student learning outcome. In addition to vision, leadership requires collaboration. History is bereft of leaders with no followers. They don't exist. And so to lead, you don't just need followers. You need people who want to follow you. These people buy into your vision, trust your ability to be fair, and believe in what you are doing. A truly collaborative spirit requires not just a willingness to meet others and perform outreach, but an openness to being influenced by those you reach out to. It's not about selling your course or advocating for your course. It's about building support and investment in your course from others. To be invested, they need to feel like they are valued and involved. True leaders recognize they don't always know best, but rather welcome input from others and let those other people know that their input is valued. Third, leaders must dare to fail. Put another way, they're comfortable with their fallibility. We all make mistakes. The great thing about college teaching is that if we make a mistake, create a poor assignment, use a reading that doesn't work, we can correct the error the next semester. We get another go at it. In my view, the worst thing we can do is continue using the same stuff simply because we always have. That's poor logic by any standard. And leaders know this. They constantly examine ways to do things better and make data-driven decisions with the input of others to try and improve their courses. Let's be honest, there's always a way to improve. But if we stop trying to do things differently simply because we are either afraid it won't work or don't want to deal with the hassle, then we will get stagnant fast. And as examples at institutions from Florida to California show, when that happens, our colleagues in other units and departments start to question what value students get in our course. Ultimately, we lead in the basic course by being out in front of curricular innovation, be it on the micro scale in our courses from year to year or the macro scale within our campus general education programs. The ground is shifting there too, and we can either help pave the way to be a better curriculum for all students or react to the decisions of others. But mark my words, recent history is littered with the graves of basic courses where departments simply hung their hat on the idea that students need communication so the basic course is safe. Fourth, leadership requires persistence. Leaders don't give up. They don't run from an obstacle. They get creative. They work harder to bring detractors on board. Leaders don't get down, they move forward. And that's what we must commit ourselves to do. Finally, leadership requires a desire to serve others. I'm often reminded of what that classic, legendary philosopher Bob Dylan once said. You got to serve somebody. To strengthen the basic course, we must finally come to grips with the fact that what we do in it, in fact, what we do in every course we teach, is serve others. For some reason, many people have attached some sort of negative stigma to the idea of the basic course as a service course. There's no shame or disdain in any definition of service I can find. The real question is not whether or not the basic course is a service course, but who does the basic course serve? The answer to that question is more complicated than we might think, because there are several primary constituencies which I can identify. The most obvious group served by the basic course is our students. All of us work at different institutions with different missions who attract students from different places. But we all have students. For some of our courses, for some of us, our courses touch every student who walks our university's campus. For others, it hits certain segments of the student population, and for others, perhaps it's only taken by majors. But all of those students are served through the course. Let me be clear, by service, I do not mean we work for them. but rather we work to help them. To properly understand what it means to have our courses serve our students, we must look to our course objectives. Now, the AAC&U, regional accreditors, and the best scholarship on assessment will tell you that you should be realistic about how many course objectives you want your students to achieve in a specific course. Usually, they recommend between 2 and 5. Objectives, or student learning outcomes, should also not be tied to specific assignments. Doing so limits the course's ability to adapt to updates in content and needs. In those terms, a course learning outcome or objective should not be to simply give a speech. It's just too restrictive, and more importantly, it minimizes what we actually try to teach in the class. Can a speech be used to demonstrate achievement of an SLO? Yeah, sure can. But is it the only or the best way to do it? Maybe not. What is a good learning outcome that serves our students' needs? For that, we must actually look to the other constituencies we serve through the basic course. Let's begin with the discipline itself. The basic course often functions as a student's lone point of exposure to communication theory, research, and training. It is also one of the chief recruiting grounds for majors. In this way, the course serves the discipline by attracting students to the field at large. In short, it keeps us alive. And so to maintain the ability to attract students, the course must be current and reflect the needs of today's society while also incorporating the rich traditions of the discipline itself. When the course becomes, quote unquote, the public speaking course, it loses that relevance and connection in ways that are difficult to recover from. As I alluded to earlier, by staying current on knowledge about the field, we are able to incorporate that into the class in ways that connect students with communication as a discipline and thus serving the needs of our discipline. What this tells us about course learning objectives is that one possible objective could be, maybe it should be, to have students be able to identify key components of communication theory that inform competent speaking skills. Another constituency the course serves, which can help inform student learning objectives for our courses, is society at large. Possibly more than any other course in a college curriculum, the basic communication course serves society by helping to create citizens. The idea that good speaking skills are a cornerstone of civilization goes back to Aristotle and Quintilian. And so one of the groups who benefits the most from strong basic course instruction is society at large, because the students then know how to communicate in a civil fashion about important issues of the day. Does that sound like a student learning outcome? It's pretty close. Pretty close. Finally, and I know this particular group that we serve is quite controversial for many, is employers. Before you come to any conclusions, let me explain what I mean. When people question the need for communication to remain in the core curriculum, one of the first places we tell people to cite, to look at, is survey data from employers that indicates communication skills as one of, if not the top skill they seek in graduates as a reason for why our course is essential. We all do it. Employers say it's important. Yet we also turn around and get ridiculously defensive whenever someone suggests we should listen to what businesses say they want in our courses. We can't have it both ways. And I respectfully submit that in order to serve the needs of our students, we must solicit input from employers. Not to have them tell us how to run our class, but rather by helping us understand what they mean by communication skills, so that we deliver what they need and thus turn them into supporters for our course, so that when the Huns come down the hall screaming about taking the course away, the employers are the first ones running to the gates to defend us. Communication skills, which they reference, could mean anything from email etiquette to small group dynamics. But we shouldn't guess. We should make informed decisions about what the oral communication skills our course should focus on are, by understanding what businesses mean when they say, we want communication skills. This is exactly what we did at the Basic Course Directors Conference 2 years ago. We invited 5 industry leaders from performing arts, engineering, manufacturing, healthcare, and education to tell us what they mean by wanting communication skills in prospective employees. The conversation was fantastic. It wasn't prescriptive or combative at all. I don't want to suggest that what these 5 had to say was gospel. The sample is way too small. But it illustrates what you can learn by talking with members of companies that hire graduates from your institutions. Talk to your career services. Get a list and consult with them. When you have these conversations, you're listening, not making promises, but be open to what they have to say. Here are some things I've found that are commonly said by employers when they try to define communication skills as what they're looking for. They want their employees to be able to engage in disagreement civilly, advocate for an idea, be collaborative in teams, not be afraid to walk into their boss's office, and be collaborative. And interestingly, what they don't list is giving speeches. As I'll discuss in a few moments, this is not a problem. It's an opportunity. Before I move on, there is one other thing I wish to point out. One group I said the course does not serve: us. When we believe the course exists for us, we lose focus on why we do what we do and who we do it for. We serve our students, our discipline, our society, and yes, those pesky employers, not ourselves. Serving others is the hallmark of selflessness that society thrives upon. Serving ourselves is the sign of selfishness and individualism and actually works against our mission as educators. Teaching, whether it is this course or any other, cannot be about us. It must be about serving the needs of our students and our communities. A few moments ago, I talked about devising student learning outcomes, and after discussing whom we serve, it probably makes you think that we will have different outcomes for the basic course at different institutions. That's it. That's exactly it. We will have different outcomes for different student populations. And like our students and our world, those outcomes can and must change with the times. By learning about our discipline and job, leading our program with vision and boldness, and by recognizing we serve not just our students, but the whole of society, we become ready to embrace developing what I call a living basic course. Let me define living basic course for you. It's a course that grows, changes, is never the same from semester to semester because it constantly adapts based on the experience of the prior semester and how well that version fulfilled achieving course goals and the needs of our constituencies. When you embrace the living basic course, you say goodbye to the idea that you have a course in the folder and simply roll it out each time you teach it. So how do we develop a living basic course, and what are its challenges and benefits? Let me explain what may seem to be a radical approach to the basic course. Developing a living basic course requires the collaborative spirit and commitment to use assessment the right way that I spoke about a few moments ago. To have a course that lives, sustains itself, it needs to be tied to far more than what we do. Its learning objectives must be written in a way that do not tie it to specific assignments students do in the class, but rather context-independent communication skills that we want students to have when they finish the class. Things that apply in more than just the scenarios of our class. To illustrate this change in perspective, let me tell you about my personal epiphany. 5 years ago, before I made the move to UD, I considered myself a public speaking guy. That was the basic course to me. Objectives included things like giving a persuasive speech, an informative speech, informing the audience, doing audience analysis, things like that. Then I applied for UD. And on the interview, my late friend and colleague Don Yoder asked me a question that blew my mind. In asking how to teach dialogue, what would become a hallmark of our basic course, Don asked if I could devise a way to do it without speeches. I was stymied. I was speechless. Which something several of you who know me will tell you is kind of hard. I believe my reaction was something to the effect of, bleh. As restrictive as I thought that sounded at the time, I grew to realize it was actually quite freeing. By taking away the one thing I was comfortable with, the one thing I always did, I was forced to focus on skills, not assignments. I quickly realized the skills that were our objectives could be accomplished through multiple different assignments and contexts, not just speeches. This also made the class much more meaningful to students who see speeches as things they're rarely going to do in their life, but communication, something they always needed. Our student learning outcomes for the basic course at UD have not changed since I arrived, and the course has changed quite a bit. Our outcomes are that students will be able to, 1, explain complicated subjects to non-experts. 2, advocate a position using civil and ethical discourse. 3, engage in dialogue where the goal is understanding, not agreement. And 4, critique the oral messages of others. Can these be done through speeches? Or better put, are speeches the best way for students to demonstrate they learned these skills? I've discovered that the answer is no. In our first round of pilots, all of 3 classes, each instructor tried different things. One instructor did all speeches, another did 2 speeches and a round table, and a third used technology, a tool called Collaborate, for remote small group discussions. We asked students for input, had faculty observe the sections, and assessed performances through a pre- and post-test. Based on that information, we made some changes for the next round of 12 pilots. After the second round, we found speeches worked really well for the persuasive outcome. Good way to find out that they've accomplished that skill set. But the explanation outcome consistently failed to meet our goals, as did the dialogue as speech model. For explanation, it requires, strangely enough, listener understanding. Not just the delivery of information. To wit, what we've done is, rather than conceptualizing it as an informative speech which functions on a linear path, we now have students in pairs doing explanations that require, as part of the student's grade, understanding on their partner's part. It's not a speech. For dialogue, it means a fluid exchange, not a structured speech. Both of these goals are now assessed through different assignments, not speeches. Fast forward 3.5 years, and we now have 3 very different major performances in the class, as well as a low-stakes assignment, interteaching, embedded throughout the semester that helps students work toward developing the skills articulated by the student learning outcomes. The class has not been taught the exact same way in 2 semesters. Sometimes the changes we make are significant between semesters, but often it's just a little bit of tweaking here and there that we learn through assessment to try something new. Using assessment to inform changes in our class is the right reason and right way to use assessment. It's not for others to file reports. Frankly, if the administration at the University of Dayton came back and said you no longer need to do assessment, I would still do it. Because to me, the benefit is for me. It's for my classes, not for the university. So embracing the benefits of assessment help you make modifications to your course that are meaningful to your students and the other parties interested in the course. It helps us do our job better. I understand the UD experience is not possible for everyone because not everyone gets the chance to build a class from scratch. But creating a living course through learning, leadership, and service, that can be done. Doing so, though, necessitates an acknowledgement of the challenges we face in embracing this mission. Every university is different. Some are beholden to state standards that require, for some unknown and really quite short-sighted reason, that students deliver a certain number of speeches for a certain number of minutes in a semester, as if that quantity is going to automatically make them good. Some universities have unionized faculty that have a say in the textbook or even the structure of the course. Others still place heavy teaching burdens on basic course directors who, at yet other institutions, must also perform research. Frankly, there are plenty of ways people can rationalize not doing this hard work. But for my mind, the one reason we should do it is the most powerful, because it is in the best interests of our students and of society. The benefits of the living course are many. It allows the course objectives to be consistent at our own institution, but our assignments and content can change with the developments of our discipline and demands of our constituencies. This makes creating and maintaining the course each year an engaging enterprise that keeps us interested. In other words, it helps diminish the possibility of burnout, because every semester it's a little bit different. It also allows us to gather data on decisions for the course, but also data we can analyze and share with each other by writing our assessment analyses for journals like the Basic Communication Course Annual, CommTeacher, and CommEd. Perhaps most importantly to the discipline in our departments, it forces us to continually engage our colleagues and constituencies regarding the course, educating them on what we do and seeking their input on how it might be better, thus creating support for, rather than a need to defend what we do. If this sounds like hard work, it is, but I tell you it's worth it. I came here today to explain how to strengthen the basic course, and I truly want it to become our mission and our moment to do it. We must, as a discipline and as a group, stop being reactive to the context in which we find ourselves and be proactive about shaping them for the betterment of our students and our communities. We do this by embracing the idea of being lifelong learners ourselves, leaders who take chances to make bold visions realities on our campuses, and servants who do these things because they benefit a host of others, not ourselves. Through our commitment to learn, lead, and serve, we can create living courses that sustain themselves through changing times. The only question now is, are you prepared to do what is necessary? Will you pick up this standard? Join me in making higher education, specifically communication education in the basic course, stronger. If so, I promise you, as Mahatma Gandhi once said, a small body of determined spirits, fired by an unquenchable faith in their mission, can alter the course of history. Our work begins now. Thank you.